saying. This is from a member of the military, again in the Fox piece in Tablet. There's been an agenda at play that does seem to be pushing a focus on things that don't matter in what should be a militarily focused organization, such as paying for the surgeries of transgender members, said Larson. At the same time that the military is restricting, isolating, saying you're undeployable to unvaccinated soldiers because you're medically unsafe, because you're not receiving an experimental gene therapy that hasn't even been fully tested, that same organization is saying they will pay for you to receive the surgery and be stuck on these hormonal therapies that do literally limit your ability to be in isolated situations in many ways, he said, referring to an Army policy issued in June 2021, a few months before the vaccine mandate, that the service would pay for transgender soldiers to receive hormone therapy, mental health care, and surgeries where deemed necessary. The fact that those two things occurred at the same time, to me, is just evidence of an agenda at play. They are exactly the opposite of one another in terms of the kinds of arguments they are making about what is necessary and what is important for both health and bodily autonomy and also for military readiness. Because, and this is, we're mostly talking about COVID vaccine mandates here, but to have the service member tied together, which I didn't know that they were so close in time, that the military had said, actually, we are going to provide the quote unquote healthcare for transgender members that includes mental health care, okay, but also hormones and surgeries, which put aside for the moment whether or not anyone should ever have those things done to them. But what they clearly do is render you a person who is a medical patient for life. If you do not maintain, depending on what the surgery was and depending on what the hormonal interventions are, maintain continuous medical activation of the fallout from those medical interventions in order to reveal yourself as the transhuman that you think you are, the transgendered human that you think you are, things go very bad very quickly. And so the military is simultaneously saying that they will support and fund such interventions, which make a force inherently less ready because you can't have such people in places where they will not have constant access to health care, and forcing interventions on people, which we know now, and there was lots of evidence before, have bad health effects. And Fox does finish this piece by saying that none of the people that he interviewed for this piece have any adverse events from the vaccines that they know, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. 1 in 35 we're hearing. Right?
Yeah, this is, and I tried to raise this point too, which is, if you want a country in which individual freedom is prioritized in the way that it has traditionally been in the U.S., you need a strong, and that means masculine, military. The idea that the military would voluntarily play games, the military can just simply say, look, if you are in some form of medical transition, you can't be in the military because it's inconsistent, right? It's simply incompatible with the mission, rather than coddling these beliefs and confusing the role, the mission of the entity.
I think that's true, but that's more in the weeds than my objection here.
No,
right? It's not reasonable to be having healthy breasts be chopped off because you feel like they offend your sense of self. No, it's not a good idea. But presumably, a few months later, the ramifications of that are not such that you are going to be needing health care to maintain that condition. But the hormonal interventions and the so-called bottom surgeries aren't stable.
Right.
They aren't stable. We need We need a military full of people who can be sent out with not much, but a lot of training and their own ingenuity, and can be self-sufficient and can create self-sufficiency for not just themselves, but for a bunch of self-sufficient people, that the whole group can be self-sufficient and they can find what they need and do what they need to do and not fall apart if they don't have the intervention of some, hyper modern technological thing that has suddenly come on the market and is everyone, too many people's favorite pastime.
No,
it has zero place in the military. It's like saying, okay, I've always had this dream of summiting Everest, but I'm going to start on, cross-sex hormones and have a really invasive surgery a little bit before, and I'm going to expect everyone else in my team to make sure that I'm okay. Well, you know what? No. That you and your selfishness, and that's the shallow end of the pool, don't have any place on that mission.
So I was going to say, the feminizing of the military, the confusing of gender, is the shallow end here. The medical compromising that you're talking about is the next phase. The demoralizing of the force over threatening people's careers if they refuse to take these shots. And it's not even that. It's not even that you have to leave the military and go to a new career. These people did not get honorable discharges. They were threatened. They got general discharges, which means that anybody who's looking to hire them is going to wonder what it is that they did wrong. And so my point is, all of that is obviously going to destroy morale in this force, where morale is a central piece of the weaponry. And what I tried to raise many months ago, Robert Wright took me to task, and we had a little back and forth on DarkHorse about it. But my point was, we have enemies. We have a corruption problem in which people can buy policy changes that serve their interests at the expense of the interests of the American public. Why on earth do we think that so many policy decisions that compromise the morale, the readiness, the ability to recruit of this force, why do we think that that was actually just error upon error? Why is it not obvious that we should be asking the question at least, hey, all of these things make us less capable of defending the Republic. Some people don't want us to be able to defend the Republic. Have we checked to see whether or not there was influence exerted that caused us to do so many stupid things to this essential function?
I'm reminded of our piece I wrote and we talked about here, and that actually we put on some DarkHorse merchandise. Do not affirm, do not comply. Right? Both the language of affirmation of your child's preferred gender, and less so compliance, because compliance does have a negative connotation. But affirmation is certainly the word used because it's this very positive affirmation. But that message needs to be heard. That message needs to be heard by everyone for sure, but it's going to be harder to hear, and therefore even more important for women to hear. Because on average, a well-known, well-replicated psychological conclusion is that women are more agreeable, which is a term of art in psychology, right? That agreeableness, as one of the big 5 personality traits, is higher in women than in men. And that means less likely to argue, less likely to disagree, more likely to go along to get along, right? And there are places for agreeableness, and there are places for disagreeableness. And like many of the differences in sex between humans, the differences point to the fact that both have their place and that both are valuable. But as we move towards valorizing female typical ways of being over male typical ways of being across domains, we are putting ourselves at risk, because the male typical ways of being also have their place. And at the point, like, this is the most obvious place. At the point that we're doing that to our military, this should be extraordinarily obvious, right? The military is historically, traditionally, an entirely male place. Now, many militaries have some female members, but it is never going to be, the military is never going to be a female phenomenon, nor should it be, right? This is ridiculous, right? So your point about compliance, about increasing compliance in the military is actually another kind of feminization because compliance is itself a form of agreeableness.
You're right.
And so this is yet another way that we are effectively feminizing our military. And we can talk all day long about what kinds of domains we would like to see quote unquote masculinized or feminized, and in general I don't use those terms. But if we start with the conclusion, again, well replicated from psychology, that agreeableness is more common in women than in men, and that all of us have some agreeable moments and all of us have some disagreeable moments. Just, it's not necessary to go there. But if we start with that well understood conclusion that agreeableness is more common in women than in men, and we also understand that the military historically requires a hierarchy, and for everyone beneath everyone else to actually follow orders, but not when they are unethical. What we don't have is an agreeable military historically. We have one that recognizes hierarchy and keeps its brain alive. Whereas compliance, agreeableness, just for the sake of agreeableness, just for the sake of not causing trouble, is not what we need in the military. It's quite the opposite.
Actually, it raises another point that you have made. You have objected when people have said that men are more competitive, and you've pointed out that men are differently competitive.
I have written peer-reviewed articles on this topic, yes.
Your point has been that female competition tends to be more cryptic.
Yes.
And the issue of a military force in which men are empowered to push each other around a bit, to compete with each other, that's part of the thing that makes the force work, is now shifting into a mode in which people are cryptically bullying each other and using powers in ways that they were not designed in order to force others to demonstrate compliance to a normal order, that does sound more like the female mode of competition and not the male one. So
you don't want whisper campaigns driving what is done in the military, right? That is completely dangerous. You also want the altercations that men will get into in the military to be exposed to everyone. You want them to be out in the open, so that also, just at the most basic level, if you do end up deployed, if you do end up seeing combat, you know who's got what skills and who's willing to go up against what and when. Yep. You absolutely can't have this being cryptic. You can't have cryptic competition in a military environment. This makes no sense at all, and that's what we're doing.
No, I can speak to the male side of this. Males pushing each other around, exposing each other's flaws, this kinds of stuff that men do when they are gathered together, those things are character building. And it doesn't mean that they're all nice, right? But the point is, in the end, when you are, in some sort of a firefight, you know who you're in battle with, and you know what they're made of, and what they're made of is better than what they walked through the door with, because
you leveled them up.
You leveled them up, exactly.